Welcome to this presentation, in which we will discuss an introduction to yoga philosophy. In order to do that, we'll need some clarity on the definition of philosophy itself. The term philosophy has two definitions as found within the Oxford Languages, basically Google's dictionary. Philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. The second definition of philosophy, and the one we will be focusing on in this presentation, is philosophy as a theory or attitude that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. For further clarity, let me include the definition of yoga, since this is not something one can find with a mere Google dictionary. In fact, I believe it is the constricted definition found by a quick search that has caused a lot of confusion when it comes to yoga as a philosophy. The title yoga stems from the Sanskrit root word yuj, which directly translates to the word yolk. And we're not talking about eggs here. The word yolk has many meanings, but the meaning of yolk connoted with yoga, and thus the meaning of yoga, is basically a tether, a joining, or union of two separate things into one. This can refer to the communion between creator and creation, or from a more scientific understanding, the inseparability of mind from matter. This is a huge concept, massive for the mundane mind of the menial mortal, or average individual. This is because the vividness of the material world is so distinct in its perceptibility that it cannot possibly be connected. Yet, when we look at things or objects without any preconceived ideas, we cannot avoid witnessing the space within which it is held. If nothing else, then at least this space is what allows matter to be connected and joined together. Though when we delve even deeper into the science of matter itself, what is found beneath the solidity and form is the same field consisting of frequency alone. It is the variation in these frequencies that instruct particles to structure themselves in the specific states that are perceived as forms, fluids, or fumes. Even just observing the flow of water between the different states and stages of matter should provide a basis of comprehension to grasp the connectedness of all physical things. Quantum physics can elaborate on this foundation of assimilation. The theory of yoga, on the other hand, takes a more holistic approach in describing this interconnectedness of all things. We cannot attempt to discuss the philosophy of yoga without referring to some source of all things, whether it be biblical, historical, esoteric, or scientific. Yoga does not attempt to name this source. Yoga simply implies that there is no separation from this source. I'm choosing to use the word source as it is a more unfiltered term for God. Many may be averted to the idea of yoga referring to God as the same God that they may know. But the yogic ideal is for one to realize that there is only one source, or God, irrespective of the name we might give it. To extend on this idea, one can refer to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Patanjali was basically an author who witnessed the complexity of the yoga texts already existing in the scriptures that originated from India from around 1200 BCE. So in about 200 BCE, Patanjali composed the Yoga Sutras in order to simplify the diverse concepts found within those scripts. The purpose of the sutras was for more people to be able to grasp the contents and information available at that time. Even with the simplified sutras, though, It took some time for the mental capacity of humanity to grow to such a point where we may fully encompass the depth of the wisdom that had been passed down for millennia. Nonetheless, we are evermore beginning to analyze and absorb the true meanings found within ancient texts, not excluding scrolls and writings of biblical, Taoist, Hermetic, and other origins of ancient civilizations. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali describes the ideology of yoga in an in-depth yet simplistic way. The first chapter, called Samadhi Pada, contains the expression of the objective of undisturbed focus or concentration. When one is fully attentive, with absolutely no distracting thoughts or shifts in mental direction, this may be called samadhi. It is often also depicted as a peaceful state of consciousness. In the first 4 verses or statements of this chapter, Patanjali begins by addressing the determined practice of yoga. From a mental philosophical perspective, Patanjali describes yoga as the suspension of thought patterns from the mind. Imagine a still, unmoving lake, wherein one can see a clear reflection of its surroundings, as if it resembles a perfect mirror, as opposed to a gushing waterfall bursting into a river. Even a river that flows is moving and thus creating patterns. The interpretation of yoga would be to find the stillness of the lake in order for one to fully observe the reflection of that which surrounds it. To be able to truly reflect on any subject matter, one must find that tranquil state of yoga. Within this pausing of mental activity, it is very clear to the mind that there is only connection. One thing always leads to another. Past and future keep chasing each other. Thought follows thought, and form begets form through transformation. As everything is constantly changing, evolving, the only concreteness can be found within awareness itself. According to the sutras, when all progressions of thought ceases, that is the only space within which the observing mind can be established in the true version of itself. When this is not the case, one identifies with one's thoughts and ever-changing aspects of oneself, instead of being aware of one's true nature, and thus the nature of reality. In conclusion, the main philosophy of yoga is one of unity. It is a philosophy that envelops practices and practical knowledge that may enhance our awareness of the innate unity that is the foundation of our physical universe. It is not possible for physicality to exist without this animated essence that pervades all things. And when human consciousness has reached a level of collective understanding, yoga is the result. Yoga is not the reaching for any attainment. It is a method of explaining what already is. An inevitable union between mind and matter exists. That union may be called spirit, source, or God. In science, it is rather referred to as the unified quantum field, ether, or even energy. In esoteric terms, we would call it oneness, collective, cosmic, universal consciousness, or even superconsciousness. In yoga, we refer to prana, which is the life force or life-giving force that emanates from pure awareness. There is so much more that can be said about yoga philosophy, but it is vital to acknowledge that the path is ever unfolding. The conscious journey of humanity has only truly begun to make itself transparent quite recently, as we endeavor into the open-mindedness and eventually mindful acceptance of the wisdom and information that cross our paths. we create even more avenues for ourselves, for our souls to venture into. May you come to realize that you are always on the right path. And so it is. Namaste.